His campaign probably put that in the teleprompter. Stay on point, Donald. Stay on point.
Everyone in America gets a free taco at Taco Bell tomorrow. Time out! Y'all take a chill.
Welcome to Review America, a podcast wrestling with democracy. I'm Brian Mann from the great state of New York, and joining me from the great state of Virginia, Nate Milton. And Nate, it's not just the two of us tonight. We are being joined by our foreign correspondent, Damian Abraham. He's going to be giving us a little bit of an outsider's edge, maybe walking us through this thing, being our big brother to the north, grabbing our little hand and walking us through this.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting Brother Abraham's opinion as an outsider. You know, we haven't had a chance to talk to this man since our great WrestleMania expedition, and this ride and this road to the presidential election feels very much in the same vein of that fantastic voyage that we had earlier this year.
Oh, and much like that WrestleMania, this has been starts and stops, and remember the big thing with, I guess, last year's WrestleMania was like, how many injuries can this company get hit with? And how can this, compounding all of these problems, one on top of another? I've said it all along, Donald Trump can't win this, but Hillary can lose this. And just when we thought we had this sure thing, she goes and she fucks it up again.
It's that old saying, and obviously I'm in a sports frame of mind because, full disclosure, we're recording this on the night of Game 7 of the World Series. So, you know, my brain is filled with these classic sports cliches, Brian Mann.
Oh, yeah, blame it on the World Series. It isn't like that happens every time we do a show. I feel like every time you and I talk, you're going to find some sporting event to peg your sports cliches on.
Hey, WNBA will be starting up in 6 months, I believe, so we got that to look forward to.
Hey, listen, maybe it's just because it's draft day for arena football, but I got to say...
Wait till you hear my hot CFL takes. But, you know, there's something to be said, Brian, for snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. And this should have been a campaign that, on paper, Hillary should be running away with. But the reality of the situation is, because of things that are of her own doing or things that are from outside interlopers, like we saw this past week, she has not been able to maintain that momentum.
Nope, and the big story, the big muck-up that we had to deal with was the return of those fucking emails.
The presidential election was rocked Friday by news that FBI Director James Comey had sent a letter to congressional leaders announcing that he was reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server of Secretary of State following the discovery of new emails.
We had earlier been told that they were on an electronic device in an unrelated investigation. What we're now told is that unrelated investigation is an FBI investigation of former Congressman Anthony Weiner of New York. There's been an allegation that he was engaged in some improper texting with an underage girl. Weiner is married to Huma Abedin, who was a top aide of Hillary Clinton when she was at the State Department.
Meanwhile, the Clinton campaign is attacking the FBI for what it believes is a clear double standard.
There's a long-standing precedent, there's a long-standing rule at the Department of Justice and at the FBI that the Bureau and the DOJ more broadly, they will take great care in the lead up to elections to avoid being seen as a partisan political player.
He went beyond just completing an investigation. He went into critiquing what was going on, and that goes way beyond the scope of any FBI director.
Anthony Weiner is like Chekhov's cock here. Like, you know, he was entered in the beginning of the play, so he's got to come back by the third act. You couldn't believe if someone wrote this. This is just all coming together with too much of a bow on top.
Yeah, you know, this is our, third or fourth October surprise in the course of this campaign. And I'm glad you brought up plays, Brian, man, because Comey kind of reminds me of, or not even Comey, but kind of the Republicans when it comes to this email thing, reminds me of Les Mis. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I might get some of these characters and things mixed up, but the main character is Jean Valjean, correct?
Correct.
And the initial infraction is him stealing bread. Am I right on that?
He does. He originally steals a loaf of bread to help feed a starving niece.
And because of this initial infraction, we get this chase between him and I forget the inspector.
Javert.
Javert, yes. I forget the inspector Javert. And we get this incessant manhunt, which started over something that was relatively minor. And with Hillary, yes, there was something there in terms of the emails and the classified information and things of that nature. But to take it to this extreme, to where we are literally approaching the eve of the election, and this is what you're bringing up, and this is the red meat that you're throwing out there to prove that Hillary is a corrupt person, to prove that she is unworthy of being the president of the United States. It feels like, and I'm going to use another one of my patented sports cliches, Brian, man, it feels like a Hail Mary.
I would maybe understand if you could confirm that every single member of Congress follows electronic protocol to the T. Essentially what's going on here, this came out during the Comey testimony, Huma Abedin is Hillary Clinton's top aide. She is married to Anthony Weiner. They're now in the process of getting a divorce. Essentially what came out in that testimony, what Huma would do sometimes, and again, this is like the most small, minor, reckless, but not criminal intent. They had an issue where they weren't able to print from the computers at the State Department, so Huma would forward emails to her private Yahoo email so she could then print them out at home to give hard copies to Hillary to read. That's what's going on here. And the thing that's just so interesting about this whole thing is that people have this idea that like she was completely misregarding top secret information, and she was just like forwarding missile codes on people's Gmails and things like this. And that's not at all what's going on here. Essentially what's going on here is that anything that was that classified would have never even entered the email protocol space. It just makes you want to rip your hair out, the double standard that's being done here, because the media needs that false equivalency. And so we're treating these emails the same way as all this Trump stuff. And because we are so binary and we are so narrative and we can only follow one story at a time, this return of these email things, and James Comey even said in his letter, this is probably not going to be significant. And when he sent the email, or when he sent the letter to Congress, they hadn't even gotten a warrant yet to look at these emails. And they flatly were like, hey, this could just be a lot of duplicates. These could all be emails we've already looked at. We don't know. What do you think? What's your diagnosis on Comey's actions to begin with?
They were puzzling because I think it's a bit of an overreach, and it feels again like Javert. Like I'm gonna mix my plays and loose here. We go from Les Mis to next Friday when you got Day and Craig as top flight security. He's like, I'm top flight security in the world, Craig. Nothing gets past me. It's like you're doing too much, man. It's like, I understand. If there is a legitimate threat to our national security, if there's a legitimate crime that has been committed, yes, take action by all means. Keep the thing going. But for something as minor as this, it feels like, she should get a slap on the wrist and be done with it.
Yeah, and Comey already took some really unprecedented actions, both with the congressional testimony and holding a press conference, which I guess was supposed to be kind of like a public shaming of, hey, you did a bad thing, but you didn't necessarily break the law, but we still should go on record as like some sort of disapproval of the action. But so the reason why he had to send this email was essentially because he had testified in front of Congress, said the investigation was over, and he felt like he was compelled to update them that the investigation was not over. I look at this, though, and I think that it's so close to an election, and especially when there's talks that, they're also investigating Trump for possible Russian connections, but they're not, disclosing any of that information. It almost feels like the better thing for Comey to have done was to just tell his people they didn't have a warrant yet, and they were investigating a completely separate case. Almost to say, hey guys, sit on this, don't move on this information for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that they didn't get a warrant yet. And if they put in for a warrant, then it would have leaked. It would have gotten out. They would have known. But at the same time, I'm sure if Comey had told them to sit on it, that also would have leaked out. The FBI, their first and foremost thought is how to protect the FBI. I know we're acting like this is a grand, apolitical group, but you look at what that thing was under J. Edgar Hoover, this thing was started under some pretty suspicious intent, so to say. Now, I'm not saying that that's still the case, but to say that there is this centuries-long record of this being this hollowed institution, not necessarily there. So for me, this feels like the FBI, more than anything, trying to protect itself. And so, yeah, it would have looked bad for the FBI if it had come out in 2 weeks that, or if it leaked out that they weren't moving on investment. All these things would have made the FBI look bad, but I think the country would have been better off for it.
And to me, it kind of plays into Comey's history, you know, because before he was the director of the FBI, he was Attorney General. And this seems very much in line. Yeah, Deputy Attorney General. And it seems very much in line with somebody that's, you know, on the hunt, trying to unearth the truth, trying to get to the bottom of the case, trying to prove something, you know, rather than his current capacity, which to me, again, it feels like he overstepped his boundaries, feels like he's doing a little bit too much here.
I don't know. We will never know if Comey would have brought political charges or charges against her if she weren't running for president, because if he had charged her, that essentially would have left one party without a nominee. And for a pretty... And people would want to maybe, you know, compare this to like what David Petraeus did or something like that. What David Petraeus did was he confirmed classified information to a biographer who he was also having an affair with. So that's much. He was essentially bragging to a woman he was trying to sleep with. And the funniest thing is the reaction to this whole private server and the fact that she had one and how overblown this thing has been justifies her need to have one. Justifies her. It's so crazy that people want to act like she's this paranoid woman. Well, the way that everyone reacts to everything she does really justifies it. There's nothing this woman can do. Fuck, her family, they started a global NGO to help fight AIDS in Africa. And people are coming after her with, like, a pitchfork, you know? It's insane that even these massive acts of good have to be looked over with a fine-tooth comb, and there's always this assumption of guilt with her and her husband.
And honestly, if you're going to hold her to the fire, or get down to brass tacks, as it were, I'd rather it be over something that actually matters, that actually is going to mean something if she has become president. Like, for me, as an African-American voter, spoiler alert for those out there listening, I'm still stuck on, you know, the crime bill and super predators, and how has your views on crime and your views on minorities when it comes to crime changed since then? You know, things like that. That's what I want to know about. That's what I want the reporters to kind of grill her on, because that affects me more than some email thing ever will.
I can't disagree with you there, buddy. And somebody who I think is probably not going to disagree with us either is Damian Abraham. You know, we kind of find ourselves on the same page here. That's why people love listening to us. And I haven't looked at the playhead for this episode yet, but if I had to guess, people probably have about 2 hours left. So let's not keep them waiting. What do you say? Do you want to jump on over, see what's going on with Damian?
Yeah, let's get this filibuster started.
I'm handsome, I'm pretty, I'm strong. I'm the Mountie, and I, of course, belong. You can try to run, but you can never hide. The Mountie always gets his back.
So now we're jumping across, I guess we can't really say the pond just north of us. We're jumping across a couple of lakes to bring in an outsider's edge to maybe make sense of all of this. Our Review America foreign correspondent, Damian Abraham, is joining us. And you're going to share some wisdom with us. But right before we started recording here, right before we started talking, you actually want to start that stuff off with a question for us.
Yes, gentlemen, I'm here to offer some views from the six about your election. And I kind of got to ask, the first question is, you know, what would it take? What's your magic number to become a sellout for Trump and become, like, you know, someone like a cheerleader for him? Like, what's your magic figure? Like, what number would that take?
Well, I guess I just would have to follow up to clarify, what does that entail exactly? Are you saying that I'm becoming like a Jeffrey Lord and I'm going on CNN for like 6 months?
Yeah, absolutely. You are in. Like, you are you are in like, $12 million of Russian politician money in.
So am I doing? So I'm getting the Corey Lewandowski, where I'm getting a CNN paycheck, but I'm also getting $500,000 from Trump.
Exactly. If it is $500,000, we don't know what your number is.
Well, that's just what he was getting from the campaign. I don't know what his CNN figure was. But Trump, what would it be? What would it be for you, Nate? Because I feel like you would be you'd be the Grey Goose for him. You'd be the one that they would definitely want because he only has like 1.5 black surrogates, I think, and they've pretty much been taken off TV because of the messes they've made.
Well, I like that you mentioned Grey Goose because that's the first thing that I would ask for. Lots and lots of alcohol. That would be necessary to seal the deal. But it's funny because I've had conversations with friends, black friends of mine, that will see like the random black dude they get to go on Fox News, and we'll just sit back and be like, damn, how much would it take for us to be one of those guys? And the older I get, that number gets lower. Yeah. Like, you know what? I can, I tend to think of myself as somebody with morals and somebody with convictions, but at the same time, neither one of those things pays the bills, Brian, man. So I think if Donald Trump offered me, oh man, this is like making a literal deal with the devil. Like I have to be set for life. Like I would not have to worry about me or my nieces or any potential future kids. Like it'd have to be a pretty hefty paycheck, but I could be bought. I guess is what I'm saying.
I mean, I see that. I guess I don't know. I don't feel like I need to be set for life, but I would need to be set at least enough to like move out of the country, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna say if it is for 6 months worth of work, I'm gonna say $5 million. What about you, Damien? Because Damien, you're also coming with You're pretty much coming with a celebrity endorsement angle. You have a strong millennial following. You're essentially the white Canadian Killer Mike in this situation. So your endorsement means a lot.
I think I would be also having to do the conversion of Canadian to American dollars. So it would probably be a lot less than it would be for you guys because your dollar goes a lot farther in the country. So, but I think I would eat a lot,
So you do it for like a pack of like ketchup chips?
Well, my wife would leave me. 100% she would leave me. So I would need enough money to weather that divorce story.
Yeah.
That would be my number one concern. And, and also providing for my kids in their new life in America. Because I would have to move there because I don't know how popular I would remain in Trudeau, Canada right now.
So if Brian would do it for $5, I'm letting this out there on the airwaves, Mr. Trump, if you're listening. Brian Mann cost you a cool $5 million. I'll do it for 3.5.
Yeah, and I would.
You'll do it for less?
I'll do it for less. I think
you're selling yourself short.
You think I could get more than you?
For what he needs you for, it's like he's got Omarosa and that's it. Like you're selling yourself short, buddy. That's all I'm saying.
Do you remember at one point early on in the election when he got like a bunch of other random endorsements from like I think Azalea Banks endorsed him for a moment? And
yeah.
It's like, what policies did he offer in the very beginning that you were like, oh no, this is the one I'm going to get behind?
Well, and there's also the thing where people confuse just him mentioning, like celebrities mentioning his name as endorsements. Yeah. That was great.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Well, he does have Tom Brady's backing because we know he had the Make America Great Again paraphernalia in his locker. So if I could be down with Tom Brady and Don King and Kellyanne Conway, that's good company.
Yeah, that's a rogues gallery. That's like the cantina. That's the cantina scene in Star Wars.
So Damien, we were wanting to have you on so we could discuss kind of what this whole circus has been like watching from the outside in, because it's felt like a really terrible reality show that we've been living in. This is almost like we unwillingly greenlit an entire country's worth of Big Brother and allowed, you know, you and the rest of the world to watch it. What is it like from the outside looking in? And just because there are, you know, as much as we like to act like, you know, Canada is just a nice clone of America, there are differences between your democracy and your, you know, electoral system and ours. So what have just been the major, both, you know, from a government standpoint and a cultural standpoint?
You know, I think, you know, politics in Canada tends to be like a little, I don't want to say behind the United States in the sense that, but just like, you know, the trends seem to happen here a little bit after they do in the United States, you know, so we're kind of like living our hope era and our optimism era right now with the election of Trudeau, you know, and so I think to watch this kind of play out, the really cynical, you know, post-hope, post-optimism play out in America has been like it's been like a reality show for a lot of people in Canada too. I think with, you know, frighteningly real results that we all have to kind of consider, I think, at this point. But it's been interesting. I remember playing a show in San Francisco 2 years ago, and it was just when Trump was kind of like talking at first about running, and I started, you know, saying like it's gonna be scary when that guy runs for president. And this guy in the crowd yelled at me, and we got in like kind of like an argument, you know, from me on the stage at the I forget the American something, at the venue in San Francisco that we played, and this guy who was like, it's never going to happen. You're just talking out of your ass. It's never ever going to happen. And that's what it's felt like at every step. Like, okay, well, this is where it stops. Like, it's not going to go any further than this. It's not going to get any further than this. And now it's like this game of chicken that we're playing with our neighbor. Like, it's like, how far are you guys going to push this?
Do you think this is a uniquely American situation, or do you think something like this could happen in, you know, up there in Canada? Because as much as we can kind of joke about Trudeau and his qualifications or lack thereof, and how he kind of is your Obama, but he's also sort of more like your George W. Bush.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you know,
I would say as
with
much
a college degree.
Yeah, I don't want to pretend like I'm any great cheerleader for Trudeau on that front either, because yeah, like I think that's a very apt description of what he is. He's kind of like our Obama, but there are some Bushian traits to be fearful of and mindful of.
What do you think, if you had to, even though it's a lot, but if you had to boil it down to one issue, why do you think Trump happened, and do you think it's something that could happen in Canada? Because things like it have happened in third world countries, but why do you think a thing like this happened here, and could it happen there?
I think it has. You know, it hasn't happened here on, you know, a federal level, but it's definitely happened here on a local level. Like we had the Rob Ford election, you know, which I think a lot of people within Toronto that follow local politics were like, no, it's not going to happen. This guy's not going to be mayor. Not that guy. You know, this is before all, you know, the drug stuff came out and all the other sort of more sinister allegations came out about him. You know, but people just were like, he was just kind of goofy and said all these horrible things, and, you know, you just wouldn't want him to be your mayor. But it happened. You know, and I think it's happened in Europe. You look at some of the elections of some of the extreme right-wing parties in countries where historically there have been kind of left-leaning socialist governments. You know, it's scary that this is seemingly like almost like a Western global phenomenon. This sort of like need for a strong man right now, and it's a reaction, I'm sure, to like what's going on and people's fear of what's happening in parts of the world where there's conflict and religious-based conflict. And I'm sure, like, you know, people want these big, tough, strong people to protect them. You know, and so yeah, I think it could happen very easily in Canada. You know, maybe, you know, not with Donald Trump, but maybe it's going to be a Don Cherry or a Doug Ford. You know, I joke, but who would have thought it would be that guy from Celebrity Apprentice?
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up Rob Ford, Brother Damien, because I think part of that appeal is, you know, the politician I can have a beer with. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a little bit of identification or the projection of yourself onto a candidate. And when you got somebody like Trump who has this outsized personality that plays well on television, I think some voters, and Brian and I have talked for weeks about the block of Trump supporters and some of their frustrations, which are valid, but this is not the guy to appease those concerns. But I think they connect a character or a caricature even of who this guy is, and they inflate that to, yes, that's going to make a great leader.
Yeah, and I think this whole idea of why we want politicians to be like this chummy, everyday kind of person that we could have a beer with. You would never pick a pilot based on that. You're like, I hope this pilot's the type of guy I could have a beer with, or a surgeon. I hope my surgeon's the type of guy I could have a beer with at the end of the day. You want the most qualified person, and politics are fucking complicated. International relations is complicated. That's why people go to school for it for really long times. And I just, I'm not a, and once again, this is coming from a Canadian. So as a Canadian who's read a lot of Noam Chomsky in his younger formative understanding of politics years, I'm not a big fan of a Clinton style government, but at the same time, at least it's someone who seemingly has put the time in to know how this whole game works.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you look at we've got democracy here. In case people listening to this podcast didn't know that yet, we have a democracy here in America, but it relies on, here we're talking about, you'd want to pick the best pilot or the best surgeon. I think the problem is that the majority of people, as Americans, we can't even necessarily agree on what the problem is and how to fix it. Whereas, if you were going to a surgeon, you've pretty much gotten to the point where you know what the problem is, and you're now trying to get someone to fix that problem. Or if you're hiring a pilot, you're at least saying, okay, we all agree we need to get from this point to this point. In our country right now, I feel like it'd be the equivalent of going to a surgeon and being like, hey, I don't know if I should get a nose job or if I should get my appendix removed, and who should we talk to about this? It just feels like we can't even get on the same page about what our problems are. It feels like there's this real lacking of, we're not even looking at the same facts. Now, is that something that sort of plagued you guys up there? I know that your media has started to sort of mimic ours, but do you feel the same extreme divide there? I mean, yeah, you have a guy like a Rob Ford, but do you feel that same sort of massive divide that you maybe feel here? And do you feel it here when you tour in America?
I definitely feel it when I tour in America right now. We for some reason, we're one of the last groups in the world that has not switched over to just using your phone to navigate when you're on the road, and we still have a sat-nav system. And it took us on the weirdest route, kind of through the rural side of Pennsylvania and a rural side of New York State that we've never kind of been through. And it was, because when you're in a city like Philadelphia, or you're in a city like New York City, you would be like, oh, well, everyone seems to be behind, Hillary Clinton. Everyone seems to be kind of going to that, or Bernie Sanders in the early starts of the election. It just felt like. But then you're in these other parts, and now you start seeing all the Trump signs, and you're like, oh, there is this other side of the country. I think in Canada, it's there, definitely. You look at Stephen Harper, and you look at, the way people vote. I think the big difference, though, is we don't really have the same influence of religion on politics, and it doesn't. We don't have a lot of those issues that are so kind of key and so divisive. I think in America aren't necessarily in the same place. Abortion and things like that, gun control, healthcare. Those issues are kind of already set in stone in Canada, so we don't really have those kind of touchstone issues at play in elections yet, but that's changing. You know, like it really in the last sort of 2 elections, you've had certain politicians kind of begin to float those. You know, and I think in the last election, and Stephen Harper's kind of Islamophobia that he was peddling was very disturbing and very reflective of kind of pushing for a divide in this country.
Well, talking about, how you guys view us and our politics, I'm wondering what is the general consensus or the consensus of the people that you talk to about the Democratic Party and its current state? We mentioned Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, obviously, and of course, we got to give a shout out to Obeezy. Hashtag thank you, Obeezy. I want to get that going. I want to get that trending.
Hashtag don't leave.
Hashtag don't leave. And if you do leave, is there a way we can get Michelle up in there during the changeover? But how do you guys view our current Democratic Party here in the States?
I'm like kind of right behind you on not wanting. I think Obama, like I remember playing a show in New York City the night of the inauguration in 2008, and just the level of excitement and hope and just joy in that room. And I just kind of I think about what watching news that happened in your country unfold in the last couple of years, and just thinking what it would have been like if anyone else had been in there other than Obama, and just wondering how they would have handled things, because, and he's got his faults, and I'm sure people could point him out all day to me, but at the same time, I don't know, like, he seemed like a pretty damn good leader to me. Compared to some of the other options. I think, a lot of people here love Hillary Clinton and are very excited about the first female president, being there. But I think, like other people are like myself and not necessarily the, like look at Clinton is very, Hillary Clinton is very hawkish. She's making she's been talking about Syria for a super long time, and going in there. I think that is a little troubling, to see, and you wonder what's going to happen under a Clinton presidency. But I think, it's going to be pretty much, I imagine, business as usual. In a way that I don't know if a Donald Trump presidency is going to be business as usual, from the way he talks in interviews and speeches and every other form of public address.
And on Twitter at 3 in the morning.
Yeah, like there's just like a lot more weird, scary potential outcomes, I think. That way, that's what shocks me. I think looking at this election, it's not like you have, two radically opposed politicians. You've got two pretty similar as far as what it's going to be like. I imagine with your Constitution. Like, I can't see Hillary Clinton walking in there and scrapping the Second Amendment. Like, I just don't see that. She's not that kind of president. Or I would imagine. Once again, this is an outsider. I'm not judging. I'm just observing.
Yeah, and you mentioned scary, and we talked about scary earlier. And the big thing that is, I guess, the scariest thing right now is that because both these candidates have flaws and aren't overwhelmingly liked by the U.S. population, that it's always been that whoever the race is about is losing. And because of this latest... Director Comey decided to write a pen pal letter to Jason Chaffetz. We might have a racist tyrant in the White House for 4 years. Kind of coming down here at the wire, how does this race look like to you? How do you think that the shift, the tide is just changing over to Trump's direction? Because I've never felt like this was an election he could win, but I always thought this was an election that Hillary could lose. And when you only got 2 choices, it depends where that momentum is. And it looks like that a week from today, the momentum might be on his side. Now, if the election was 2 weeks from today, who knows? Maybe we'd be back on her side. But when the time runs out, when the clock stops, what do you think's going to happen next Tuesday?
You know, like that's the thing. You know, I remember it was like last week. Josh from my band got into the van, and he's American, you know, and so he got into the van and was like, they've just reopened the investigation into the emails for Hillary Clinton. And my stomach just fell, you know. I was just like, holy shit, this is like a movie. Like it's playing out like the Terminator or something. Like this is how it all just seems like Skynet's just going to happen and we can't stop it, you know, no matter what we do. And, you know, like that's what it kind of feels like if I'm being super pessimistic. If I allow optimism to creep in a little bit, I kind of look at the last few elections and the margins, you know, always seem so close, you know, and it could go either way. And then you look at the popular vote and it's close, but not nearly as close as it made it seem beforehand. So that could play in both ways, I guess. But I don't know, I just hope clearer heads prevail. And it's like, you don't think for a second that if Donald Trump had classified informations, he wouldn't be leaving this shit on the subway or something? Like, that this would, like a hacked phone would be the least of our worries?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, I just love that, you know, a big-time band is sitting around talking about presidential politics. Like, that's the least rock star thing I can think of. So good on you guys.
Well, I love that you call us a big-time band, Nate, so keep saying that, buddy.
Hey, if I get this $7 million from Trump, you know, I'm gonna back you.
Okay,
I just up my price, Brian. I'm getting a little more expensive.
Well, you need a little fucked up. You gotta write that theme song for Trump if you do.
But Brian and I have been using the analogy of this as wrestling, and I think maybe as we enter this last week, maybe the analogy needs to switch a little bit, because I don't know about you, Damien, but this feels to me as we get close to the wire more like an MMA fight, where nobody's going to come out of this unscathed. Nobody's going to come out of this without taking a couple bumps and bruises, maybe a bloody nose. And so my question to you would be, how effective do you think Hillary can be, presuming she wins, and God help us, let's go to the alternative. What if Donald Trump wins this decision? How effective do you think he could be governing?
Well, that's the thing about your country is, like, ultimately I think the president has more power internationally as a figurehead than they do internally at times, it seems, because America, unlike Canada, is incredibly democratic in how it's set up on paper, at least. Like, there's a lot of checks and balances. Like, I don't mean it actually plays out very democratic for everyone, but I mean, like, you know, we vote for everyone in America. In Canada, we only vote for one person at every level, and that person, if we're lucky, is going to decide the government and you know, pick our judiciary and everything. So, you know, like I kind of like think that no matter who wins, you know, it's gonna be worse than, you know, the last couple of years of Obama being fought at every turn. I think it's gonna be, you know, like it'll be like the government in Belgium, like pretty much an ineffective government for the next 4 years.
Yeah, that is a scary thought, and I kind of want to expand it, thinking of that way of like what will happen the morning after, the months after, the years after, which either way this goes, and imagining a Hillary victory and a Trump victory, and we can just kind of go around and sort of say what we think of both. Honestly, I think Trump probably loses interest or gets charged with a crime within the first year. If I had to guess, I mean, people, for some reason, we're not talking about the fact that he goes on trial for fraud in November and goes on trial for child rape in December.
Yeah, how come that child rape has not come up?
I have no idea why the media doesn't talk more. I think because, and this is just my cynical anti-media mindset, or at least media critical. I mean, I'm in the media, but media critical in terms of cable news is that the minute you start talking about that, it gets really creepy and icky, and you can't talk about the guy at all.
Yeah.
And it just is so disqualifying that I don't know. It is tough, but it's crazy because like a judge isn't throwing it out. Like it's being heard. Like there's testimony here, and it just kind of because it was almost like the first couple times I heard about this story, I was convinced. I went to like Snoops.com to be like, well, this can't be a real thing because no one's talking about it, and it's a real thing that just no one's discussing, and that is weird. So I think one of those two things would turn out to be criminal, or he'll do some criminal act while in office. And I think if Hillary wins, Republicans are going to be set. I mean, they're going to be, setting up her impeachment hearing for the week after her inauguration. I would be surprised. I mean, there's already Republicans right now talking about the possibility of impeaching her, and that's like, and we're already there. Like, we don't even have the 100-day honeymoon period anymore. Like, I would be surprised they try to push back the inauguration. We might get a couple extra months of Obama out of this. But either way, I think Tim Kaine
can we push it back 4 years?
Either way, I think that Tim Kaine will be a good president. I think Mike Pence, that horrifies me as a president. So if for no other reason, I am voting for Tim Kaine next Tuesday.
Good
old corporate Kaine.
Once you guys wake up, like we've had this happen in Ontario when the NDP party came in the first time under Bob Rae. It was largely a protest vote that kind of came up the middle because we have a multi-party system here. But once you have one of these outside candidates come up the middle and you wake up it's not Hillary or Trump. Like, it's 1,000,000 to 1, but what happens if it happens?
Oh, so you think there's like some chance where Evan McMullen actually wins Utah, and then no one gets 270, so they go to the House, and the House decides that Evan McMullen should be president.
It's kind of like a King Ralph scenario, the John Goodman movie.
That's fine. I'm so disappointed in your man's Gary Johnson, man. Because I think if Gary had his stuff together, man, he obviously wouldn't win, but he would have made it interesting.
Well, if Bill Weld was at the top of that ticket, there's no doubt in my mind they'd be polling like 20% right now.
Yeah.
If Bill Weld was at the top of that ticket, but he's not.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing that's going to be really positive is there's going to be some marijuana ballot initiatives, so at least that'll soften all the blows in some states.
In California, yeah, that'll be good for them.
Yep.
What about you, Nate? How do you see this forking off?
I think if Hillary wins, we'll get a very contentious next 4 years. I don't know if it'll be as bad as when Obama was in for the first 4 years, because it was a whole lot of habitual line stepping going on.
I don't know. I feel like it's already it's already worse than it was at any point during Obama's first 4. I could be wrong.
See, I think the thing with Obama, and it's not just a black thing, I think it's his experience in the Senate. Like, I think there was a general disrespect or lack of respect for Obama, whereas with Hillary, they hate her, but I think they respect her. So I think that there'll be less open stuff like my man in the State of the Union. You're a liar. Like, there'll be less of that stuff. But I think there'll be more political wrangling behind the scenes than was with Obama. But the open disrespect, I think we'll see less of that.
So it's like, are white men more racist than misogynist?
That's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
Actually, let's entertain this. I will argue that I think they're more racist because everyone knows a woman. Everyone has a mother or everyone knows a woman. There are plenty of people in the Senate, Steve King, for example, that probably went a very long time in their life before even meeting a black person. Whereas I think most people are, how old are they when they see a woman for the first time? 3 seconds old? So it's, I just think that it's a higher likelihood that a lot of people, Republicans, they don't have it isn't something they run into very frequently.
And not to undercut their racism in any way, shape, or form, but there's also the fact that this is a Clinton, and they're long there's a blood feud with the Clintons.
That's a fair point. I think, though, that in terms of the misogyny versus racism, I think there's also levels to that, because I think part of what you see with Elizabeth Warren, particularly with Trump, is there's racism and misogyny. I think like powerful white women, they get treated worse than powerful white men, but on the whole, I think they get treated better than black and brown people, regardless of the race of the black and brown people.
Oh, I'm hoping that just something. Our Hail Mary pass right now is Trump saying something about Michelle Obama in the next 6 days. And we got this thing sewed up.
Oh, how great is Michelle Obama?
Yeah, like how can she not be a like my God, that's like the hope is that like wow, this means in a couple years she's gonna run, right? Like man, you watch her speak, I'm like she's awesome. She's so she should be president.
I don't know. I really don't see her running for president or any elected office. I see her being still very public, and this first couple is a very interesting example because you have to look back. You've got to go back Reagan, and then before that, a real long time to see a president who has left this liked. And there's never been a president who's been this liked and has left office this young. And it's going to be very interesting to see what this couple does. I think she's going to be still very much involved with everything she does for children. Obama, there's talks with Obama that like he really wants to own an NBA team. So like the things that like these
that'd be great.
that are on the table for these people, it'll be very, very interesting because in many ways, I think some people still think of them as de facto leaders of the country, and they're going to stay in D.C. because the kids are still in school.
And also, I guess now you don't really have to build a library anymore when you're not president because people don't really use them as much.
Apparently he will. He's made jokes about it. But yeah, I would...
Yeah. I mean, you can't have the first black president be the only one without a library. Come on, man.
Yeah, I would never... No, that's true. But I'm just saying, in the modern age, the necessity of libraries by every race is not nearly... But I guess you still need access to information, so internet. I shouldn't downplay libraries. Support libraries. I sound like Rob Ford. Rob Ford wanted to get rid of our libraries, so... No, fuck that. More libraries.
I mean, we just opened up that African American museum though at the Smithsonian. That's the same thing, right? As given Obama a library, isn't that the same thing?
I think they'll give him like he won't get a statue or anything. He'll just get like a plaque at some Denny's in D.C. This is our Obama memorial.
What if that's his post-presidential things? He's going to do the Magic Johnson thing of just opening up various fast food chains around the country in underserved areas.
Plot to Undercover Brother.
I hope he just
president.
I hope he travels around and just gives speeches and be like, "Here's what I wanted to do. Here's what they stopped me from doing." Because I would be very intrigued to see what an unopposed, or not unopposed, because I guess that would be undemocratic, but like a less opposed Barack Obama presidency would have looked like.
He should write his version of If I Did It, that O.J. Simpson book. But it's like if they did it, like if Republicans showed up and like did their jobs, so like, yeah, healthcare wasn't great when we first passed it, but maybe if you guys spent 7 years trying to fix it rather than voting to defund it, and that's, I don't know, that just speaks to a thing. And tell me if it's this way in Canada, and I'm gonna just sort of, I guess, do the American projection thing, is that at least from the outside looking in, it feels like Canadians aren't as fearful of the concept of government as Americans are. And it just seems like there's a higher sense of community, even though there certainly are some, I believe the correct term is fucked up stuff in the nation's history in terms of racism and these sort of things. It feels like the concept of, for example, your national healthcare system, there is this idea of Canadians taking care of Canadians, which we don't even have that. And I think there's, we could spend hours talking about why that is. But does that feel like an assess, or is this just me looking on the other side of the grass is always greener?
Yeah, like as once again, like a white person, I imagine an Indigenous person or First Nations person in Canada, like once again, as the history that you mentioned here, would probably have a lot more distrust of this government than I do. But at the same time, I kind of my view has always been, you need a government that people can make up and find representation to help protect us from the companies, the corporations. because those are the people that don't necessarily have the interests of the populace at heart. You know, they have the interests of the corporation at heart. And, you know, that's, you know, and at certain times, like my one MP that unfortunately lost in the last election because of Trudeau mania was an NDP guy who played in a punk band called L'Etranger. I could call him up. I had him almost on my podcast. Like, you know, if I had a little more follow through, he would have been on the podcast. Like, you know, like I could get him and I could talk to him about weed if I wanted to, and be like, not that he smokes it, but I could be like, here are my concerns about cannabis and medical cannabis in this country. And so, yeah, I don't, you know, I certainly fear elements of my government, and I fear some of the shit that they do, but I don't fear him. And I really felt like when he was my member of parliament, my elected official, that I had a legitimate voice in Canadian government.
Now, why do you think that is? Do you think that it's just, like, what are the cultural differences here? Like, obviously, up there you have a much different relationship with guns than we do down here. What do you think it comes down to? Is it just that because Canada is a smaller nation that it's easier to trust across the board? You know, versus, you know, growing up in Canada versus touring the U.S., what are some of the, I guess, just the at a glance personality differences? Why do you think that is?
We don't have the revolution narrative in our history, you know, that America has. I think is part of it. Like, you know, like America was, you know, a rebellion, you know, and its, you know, founding of, you know, well, white people have been coming to America. Like that was like, you know, people rebelling against England. In Canada, we eventually asked permission to be home country. And I think, you know, right from the get-go that's kind of sewn in is maybe not like a national distrust of government, but there is like this sort of like, you know, like standing up to the government as opposed to just asking for stuff from the government. You know, but I think you brought up guns is a big one too. You know, but not to say that there isn't guns here, there isn't violence and things like that, and gun violence in this country, because there certainly is. But at the same time, you know, it's not as easy. They're not as prevalent. There's not as many accidental deaths from guns because you don't have as many of them lying around people's houses. And I think, yeah, like healthcare is a big one. You know, like having, I know that no matter what job I have, you know, like right now, like I'm a musician and I make freelance hosting gigs for Vice. You know, like it's not really the most, you know, like promising as far as, you know, consistent work, but at the same time, like I know my kids are always going to be able to go to the doctor, you know, and I know that there are social programs that I have access to, and they've been gutted by, you know, neoliberal ideals in the last few years, but at the same time, it's still there. Like we still do have some of these programs, so. You know, I think those are some of the differences I think between our two countries, and you know, we also still have that British influence that kind of, you know, we're still technically a colony. You know, we're still part of that.